Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology, Debunking Mythology. And thank you all for joining. Today we have a very special guest and we have a very special topic also. Because I always said, and today we're going to see it with proofs. I always said the way our brains are wired is different. The Indian minds are wired in a different way because of the language. All comes down to language also. Because if you look at the grammatical composition of any language, then how certain adverbs and adjectives are placed before an object and subject after an object defines how you think also, the thought process. So if you look at the Indian scriptures, scriptures is the wrong word, shastra. I have to be Sanskritically accurate nowadays. So the Sattology has put more restrictions on me also. It's not just you. This is I have to follow what I say. So here, from according to shastra, for those who don't understand shastra, shastra means texts which guide you for a better thing, do better in life. So shastra, according to Indian shastra, the if you look at the way it is constructed, first the subject is defined and then the object comes in. Like for example, first the character of, say for example, Bhagavan Ram will be spoken. Who is he? How is he? How he thinks? What he does? Or about Krishna, or about Vaman Dev, or any of the great personalities like Vyasadev. First, the description will be about the Vyasadev, and then the person will come into play. So this is how the scriptures, shastra, the Vedic shastra, are done. And you'll find it amazingly in Bhagavad Gita, entire Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita in the first part, Prishtabhumi is set, seeing observing the armies. The first chapter is all about who is there, what is the scene, and then the subject will start. In that way, people are connected. So the narrations of the Bharatiya Shastra or the Vedic Shastra or Hindu Shastra is so scientific. So, and that also defines how we are as a people. So when you go to India, or if you're giving a lecture in an Indian seminar, the way the host is going to introduce you is first they're going to talk about your achievements, who you are, and then the name will come in. But if you go in a Western audience, then we'll start with he is this, first the name, and then who is he, then it is going to describe. Sometimes it really becomes embarrassing because you're hearing your praise for a long time. So today we have very special guest, a friend, and also a very amazing scholar, which picks out these finer things in life. And without delay, let us welcome Shri Deepali Patwadkar.
Namaste.
Namaskar.
Thank you, Adityaji, for giving me this opportunity to speak over here.
It's always a welcome. You're very welcome and always a pleasure. And I have seen that you have been very active on Facebook, and despite all the things going against Facebook, but still that's the forum we got to speak our mind. We normally don't have any other forum. So Deepaliji, first before I think you have some slides to show also, but before we start, I said few things, but what do you want to add on it as for the knowledge systems and how they're different than the West?
Yes. Yeah. Before I answer that, I must speak about the way you differentiated between scripture and shastra. So just to define, scripture is something which is written, whereas shastra need not be written at all.
Right.
And in India, it has always been an oral tradition. So in India, the written word doesn't have so much importance as much as the word which comes from the guru. So that is more important. Whereas in the Western world, it is the written word. So what is written in the textbook? That is important. And today we are going to touch upon it. So this was a really good thing that you brought up, Aditya. And secondly, you were asking about what I'm going to speak about today. So today I'm going to talk about the view of the Indians and the view of the Western civilization towards knowledge. So how is this view different in both the cases? And the main difference that I see is that, in the Western civilization, knowledge is considered as a property. It is something like a thing, whereas in the Indian view, in the Indian civilization, knowledge is considered as something that is divine. Knowledge is light, and we will see, how this view makes a difference in the way people work with knowledge.
Yeah, no, the good point you said, because the sometimes the when we see the Western authors, they see India in a very different way, and they sometimes, there is something like being direct and being communicating a point. So, and also the way people understand it. And so we
Mhm.
see that interaction even in the normal society also, when the Indian Americans, they communicate something and the Western. So sometimes I feel that some things have to be said in a much more descriptive way than cut way, like the English is like a shorthand of all languages. So when you say something, then it you need to justify a lot of things when you say something, and it
Mhm.
can become
Mhm.
very cold also for some people. And sometimes people say that, oh, cut it short, say it straight, you know?
Mhm.
But some things cannot be said straight. what do you what do you have?
Yeah, yeah, that is like, going again, as you said, by the language that you're using, based upon it, the way you're going to put forth whatever your thoughts are, those are going to, change. That is one thing. And in the other way, language is also going to affect how you interact with the world, how you think about the world. So
Yes.
that is also defined by the language that you speak. So
So let's get started. So one thing, I would like to, you can share the slides actually if you want. Ready?
yes, yes, I do want to.
Meanwhile, I'll add something. Somebody said, what is the history of Veda? Now, Veda means knowledge. So sometimes these foolish questions have to be answered with a question, not with an answer. So I always ask them, what is the history of knowledge according to you? So that goes. If the history of knowledge you cannot tell, similarly, the history of Veda you cannot say, because our human life can be chronologically few years, but it doesn't mean that knowledge was not existing. Knowledge is existing right from the time of creation. So Veda, the history of Veda means is just the history of knowledge. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes, please carry on.
Yeah, how well you have put it. Because even the word knowledge, it comes from the same root as Ved.
Ved,
So it comes from with,
with
and even wisdom, it comes from the same root. And yeah, we go on this. Uh, what do you say? We go on this journey of looking at understanding what is knowledge, and how do we associate ourselves with knowledge.
mhm.
So this is to quote Krishna from Bhagavad Gita. And this is what he says about knowledge. This is what he says about Jnana. He says, Nahi jnanena sadrusham pavitram iha vidyate. He says, there is nothing more purifying than knowledge. There is no better purifier than knowledge in this world. So when you have knowledge, you you will have a better mind, and you will have a better body. So you should have knowledge, and that is why knowledge is a purifier. So this is the view towards knowledge in India. And in the West, what we see is that knowledge is considered as a property. And we see this in words like, intellectual property. So knowledge is considered as an intellectual property, and somebody owns it. Because it is a property, somebody owns it. And one owns it through, patents and copyright for the work that they have done. And then when some industry is going to, make money out of that particular knowledge from that particular work, the owner of that knowledge is going to earn royalty. So ultimately, in the Western thought, knowledge is money, knowledge is power. So this is how knowledge is looked at in the Western world. Compared to that, in India, Knowledge is considered as divine. Knowledge is light. It is because of knowledge that we see the world. It is because of knowledge that we understand the world. And not just the outside world, but even the inside world. And that is why knowledge is something that liberates a person. So, this is the view of knowledge in the Indian context. So, there is nobody who owns knowledge. Knowledge is, it's kind of a repository of the community. So there is a traditional knowledge repository, and whenever somebody like discovers something, or somebody researches and finds something, puts forth some different theories, all of that, it goes into the same repository. It goes into the same repository of the traditional systems. It is not owned. The knowledge is not owned. It belongs to the whole humanity. So in the West, who is he who is owning the knowledge? He gets money, right? But what does the Indian researcher get? What does the scientist get in return for this knowledge? So he gets just name and fame, and maybe respect. He's respected in the world, and he gets a mention. He gets a, what do you say, honor mention. And we will see here is this is the honor that guru gets. So he who has knowledge, he who gives knowledge, he is a guru. And guru is considered as dev. Dev is, again, dev means light. Dev means, like, sources of energy which are within us and which are outside us also. So the guru, he who is a researcher, he who is a scientist, he who is a teacher, he gets a respect as a dev or a god would be respected. And hence, this mantra, which is very popular in India, and it is sung almost daily by many Indians, many Hindus. They say, Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So this is what they get in return. They just get respect. So what does one mean by taking ownership? Let's see in the in the Indian context, when people, they find something, when they discover something, they don't really put their name on it. They don't put their name on that work of theirs. For example, there is this work called as Shulbha Sutras, and these are from the Vedic times. And these sutra, they have many formulae about related to geometry, but none of the formula has the name of a rishi on it. Or if we look at people like Aryabhat, he who, he worked on astronomy and mathematics, and he wrote down the rules for, for zero, how to use zero, the place value system. And he was able to predict, when eclipse will occur, how long will the eclipse take place, what is the distance between moon and earth. So he has done so much work, but all that he does is he just mentions his name in his work. He doesn't write anything else about him. He doesn't tell, uh, what is his name, where did he live, what were his parents, which kingdom he was living. He doesn't write anything at all about himself. And the same goes with all the other, great rishis from the ancient times. So for all of them, we see that for them, their work was more important than themselves. While in the West, what we see is that every discovery is labeled. Every discovery is labeled with the name of the owner, after the owner. So, for example, Newton's laws. So, Newton speaks about all these bodies which are at rest and which are moving, and about gravity and all those things. Even before Newton, all these things were there. So, what was it that Newton brought? These are not actually Newton's laws. These are laws of the nature, but they're named as Newton's laws. Similarly, Kepler's laws, or we see this Pythagoras theorem. Pythagoras theorem is again an attribute of a right angle triangle. It has nothing to do with Pythagoras, but it is still called Pythagoras theorem. And then there is Planck's constant, Fibonacci series, and Archimedes principle, Euclid's geometry. There is Pascal's triangle, and so on and so forth. And this is owning. This is what I mean by taking ownership of uh, of the knowledge. And when knowledge is considered as a property, it can be owned. In India, knowledge is not a property, so it is not owned. Whereas in this Western thought, knowledge is a property, it is a thing, and somebody can own it. And this is another thing that we see in the West. And this comes from, from the Roman times, finders, keepers. So this theory is basically, if you discover something, if you find something, you keep it, you get to keep it, you are the owner of it. And we see this in games also. There are so many games which are like treasure hunt. You go treasure hunting, you get all these clues, and then based on those clues, if you, whoever finds the treasure first wins it. So many, even the online games, they are based on this principle: finders, keepers. In fact, there are international maritime laws, which speak about, if you find a shipwreck which is sufficiently old enough, then whoever finds it gets to keep it. So this thought, this Western thought, we will see it even in the case of land, not just in case of treasure, but also in case of land. So during the discovery age in Europe in the 16th and 17th century, whenever the Europeans found a new land, they got to keep it. So when they found America, when they found Australia, Africa, and the sea route to India, whenever they found a new land, the finders became keepers and they became the owner of the newly found land. And the same theory, it also applies to knowledge. So whoever finds the knowledge gets to keep it. This is the thought. This is the consistent thought that we will see in the uh, Western civilization. So when the colonialists, they were in America and Africa and India, or in Australia, when they found knowledge, even the knowledge was, like, okay, finders, keepers, they get to keep that knowledge. It becomes theirs. It becomes comes under the ownership of the Europeans. This is what happened during the 18th, 19th, and 20th century, also early 20th century. So what happened during this time was, so much knowledge which was there in all these continents and which was owned by the traditional systems, which was owned by all the tribals in all these areas, this knowledge was was simply grasped, and it went into the Western world. And in the Western world, it was passed off as their own. And we see this in so many areas, like the fabric area. So the chintz fabric, which was actually made in India, the process was learned by the British and by the French, and they started manufacturing it in the same way, learning it from the Indian craftsmen. They started producing it in uh, Europe. Same goes for traditional medicines, for mathematics, for astronomy, for surgical techniques, for organic farming. So many areas we will see that the knowledge which was there in all these traditional systems, in all these various cultures, ancient cultures. This knowledge, whenever they got it, they found it, actually, not got it, they found it, they got to keep it. And one would actually call this as theft of knowledge. So because knowledge is a property, it is a thing, it can be stolen, and somebody can steal it from you as well. Somebody can steal it from you as well. And that is why the West needed all these things, like patents and copyrights and all the laws around it, because whoever had the knowledge was afraid that somebody will take it away from him, because it's a property, somebody will take it away. So it's that fear. And similarly, somebody else having the knowledge, it was stolen from them as well. So we see this for the Red Indians and the African tribes as well. And what happened was, whenever this knowledge it was taken from ancient cultures, this knowledge was shown as of, it was a new discovery, and without mentioning the source of the knowledge, without mentioning from where this tradition came, uh, it just got a new name. Like, for example, these are today's names. This is not from 17th, 18th, 19th century. This is in 21st century. And these are the new names that we see, like controlled breathing and alternate nostril breathing. This comes from yoga. This comes from pranayam, which is the Indian tradition. And there is mandal art, or there is, mindfulness techniques. All of this comes from the Indian, uh, what do you say, Indian knowledge system. All of this comes from the Indian knowledge system. So this is the view of the West. The West view is knowledge can be stolen, and the Indian view about knowledge is that knowledge cannot be stolen. Na chora haryam, na cha rajya haryam. Neither a thief can steal it, neither a king can take it away from you. King cannot tax it and take it away from you. Your brothers, they cannot ask for their share. And when you give it, it increases. That is knowledge. And hence, the whoever has written this Subhashidh, he says that knowledge is, that's why, the greatest wealth. It is the greatest wealth because nobody can take it away from you. So this is a very stark difference between the Western thought and between the Indian thought about knowledge. That knowledge can never be taken away from you. Knowledge cannot be, nobody can just take it away. So Aditya ji, before we move ahead, anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, one of the things which comes to my mind is, like, after seeing so many, reading Vedic shastra, itihas, we have seen that nowhere you'll see a Brahmana will sell knowledge. Never. They will accept charity, but they will not sell it. But
Mhm.
only in the recent, last maybe 100 years, where beginning from Max Muller and Macaulay, they were consultants. They were selling their knowledge. They were employed. Earlier, Brahmanas were never employed. They were given charity, but not given money for their knowledge. And that was such a big difference. And you'll know where you'll see that Vasishta Muni getting consulting fees from Dashrath, or Vishwamitra getting consulting fee, or even Chanakya getting consulting money from Chandragupta Maurya, and even till the time of Chola kings, Tathachari. Tathachari is not getting any money. Tathachari was just giving it out of his service to humanity. So it just brings out, and also finder keepers means pleasurization. It's a very glorified way of saying pleasurization. And where they are, when they're saying finders and keepers, like if you find I'll share some story, like when I'm at any public place and I'm talking about today's San Diego. People find the keys on the ground if they're walking somewhere, and there is a board where they have to go and hang the keys so that anybody belongs to the keys, they can pick it up. And it happens even today. Just imagine they were following finders keepers, so they can get a key, put in their pocket, and go away. So what happens to honesty and all those things? And this is, I'm talking about the general life. But when it comes to knowledge, if they find it, they think there is theirs. Like, for example, many of the Western authors, they quote very ordinary topics like meditation, and they make it so big, and they're selling it. Everything is being sold, but they never developed it on their own. They got it from somewhere else, but they forget to
Yes.
give credit to from where they got. 90% of motivational talks come from Bhagavad Gita. 99%, I'll say, not even 90%, 99% comes from Bhagavad Gita, those 700 shloka. And people use it, and they never give credit back. And in Bhagavad Gita, that is called stealing. So at least you get it knowledge, and when you give it back to Dev, then become prasade sarva dukhana. It becomes prasad. It no
Mhm.
longer remains a a stolen object. So
Right.
continue what you're saying. So great points you made there. Please.
Yeah, yeah. What you had mentioned right now, about not giving credit. That is the real bad part about using the knowledge which has been, created by a tradition. And so about giving credit, when we look at the Indian texts, we see that every person who writes it, he gives all the credit to his guru.
Right.
He gives all the credit to whom, from whom he has learnt it. So be it, be it Dhaneshwar, be it Eknath, be it Kalidar, be it Aryabhat, all of them, they tell, from whom they have learned it. And they mention the school from which, the school of thought from which they have learned all these things. So even Panini, for example, who is a grammarian, and he mentions that he has referred to the works of 12 other grammarians before him. So all this, what do you say? This is the culture of giving the credit. But when you see the same things that are happening in the US, and we will take an example from today's world. This example is from, just a couple of years ago, when there were two researchers in US who got a patent for use of powdered turmeric for wound healing. And they got a patent thinking that, this is something new. But that is not the case. In India, turmeric has been used for not hundreds, thousands of years. And
Right.
we have those, we have that evidence, we have that archaeological evidence of use of turmeric for at least 7,000 years. So this is what we have in India. And in spite of this, we see people taking patent for such knowledge. And there were other cases also when somebody took a patent for neem based fertilizer or neem based pesticide, if I'm not wrong. So something that has been in use in India for hundreds of years, that is being turned into a patent. That is, somebody else is taking the ownership of it, creating a new product out of it, and selling it back to the same poor people from whom you have taken that knowledge. So this thing of giving credit, that is necessary when you see knowledge in front of you. When there is, there is this vidya, there is this jnana, one must understand that it has taken humanity a long time to create it. Even Newton, he says that, I can see farther because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. So when something like this comes, when we see this knowledge that turmeric can be used to heal wounds, it must be known that it is not some one person who has done research on it. It is a long tradition. So many people have worked on it, and hence the credit has to be given wherever it lies. So, as you said, Adityaji, we come to selling of knowledge because knowledge is a product; it can be sold, and in the West, knowledge has a price tag. But if we look in the Indian context, knowledge is priceless. And because it is priceless, whatever amount I give to my guru, it is less. So I don't really have to give anything. I don't give any amount, I don't give money for learning, but the knowledge will be donated to me. I receive it as a donation, I receive it as a prasad. And hence that makes me, a very grateful person. I just have to be grateful to my teacher because it is my teacher who has, it is because of his kindness that I have received the knowledge. And in the earlier times, this is before the British Raj in India, education was for free. And the only thing that was required for receiving education was it would be given only to him who deserves it, who has the right aptitude and who has the right attitude towards knowledge. Only he deserves the knowledge. And after completion of education, only then whoever has reached the student, whenever possible and if possible, he will give Guru Dakshina. Again, Guru Dakshina is not a fee. Guru Dakshina is just a honorarium. So it's just a token.
No,
Aditya ji, you were saying
you
something.
brought some very important point, and 90% of today's IT industry is built on uh, consulting. Actually, 90% of all industries, and we are not talking about them because they are actually using their time to work on it. And so it's very funny that today's world, the service industry means time industry, and here we are not talking about that industry. We are talking
Yeah.
about the ancient knowledge systems, and uh, through which you improve lifestyle, and which is not, it's called vidya. We are talking about vidya here, and not
Yeah.
just the skill, hiring of resources.
Right, right, right. So yeah, speaking about like creating a skilled youth, that is education. And when in the West we are looking at the education system, this is something that even India learned during the British times, that we moved away from this jnanadan, from donation we moved to buying knowledge, to selling knowledge. So what we see is that knowledge is sold, it has a price, and it is not given to he who deserves it, but it is given to he who can afford it. So this is a very huge difference. Whoever can afford will go to the college or the school and get that education. And the colleges and the schools, they charge a fee, and the fee is charged upfront. This is such a huge difference between these two systems. And this difference comes from the way one looks at knowledge. So, those who think knowledge is priceless, they give it for free. And those who think knowledge is a property and it has a price tag, they sell it. And then we come to this, that if knowledge is a product, and the education industry, it, it becomes an industry. It is the place where knowledge is sold. And this industry, it has a structure like an assembly line, where students will go through first grade, second grade, third grade, like that. They will go through different stages, the way a product will go in assembly line. And at every stage there will be a quality control check, and finally a product will be delivered. And in this system, a student is looked upon as a product. So today we speak about things like, so such and such a person is a product of Harvard Law School. This is very, uh, I think this is very insulting to call somebody as a product of some school. Looking at students as products of a school or a college or university, whatever, it's really insulting. And uh, another thing that is to be looked at this point, it is the definition of student. So, disciple is a follower. Follower is somebody who doesn't question. Follower is somebody who just like, um, blindly follows his teacher. He is a disciple. And this is a word which is used in the Western context for a student. Whereas in the Indian context, a student is called as a Vidyarthi. So, Vidyarthi is somebody who seeks knowledge. Here, the word seeking is most important, because a student is supposed to be a seeker, and he has to be a seeker of truth. And knowledge is only given to him who can accept the truth. And there is this story of Satyakam Jabala. It comes in a Upanishad. I would just like to tell that story, where there is this little boy who comes to a guru, and he says, "I want to come in your school and I want to learn from you." So the guru says, "Okay, go home and take permission from your parents and tell me your mother's name, father's name, etc." So the little child, he goes to his mother and asks her, like, what is my father's name, and what is his gotra and all those things. So she tells him that she has been a Ganika and she doesn't know who his father is. So she tells him that, and this little child, he comes back to the teacher and says that my mother's name is Jabala, and I don't know who my father is. So this Rishi, this guru, he simply lets this child in his school and says, "Okay, we will start your uh, education right away." And the moral from this story is that the only thing which is required for a student to learn is having a kamana for satya, having the will to know the truth, having the uh, what do you say, having the power to accept the truth. So when this child, he comes to know that he doesn't have a father, and he doesn't, like, he doesn't have a lineage, he doesn't know what the gotra is, what his jati is, he knows nothing about it, but he accepts it, he accepts the truth, and he is strong enough to go to his guru and tell the truth. And hence his guru names him as Satyakam Jabala. So these are the characteristics of a student. And mainly what the Indian thought is that education is for the person who is jidnyasu, who is curious, and who has, who has a thirst for knowledge. Again, to quote Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that Tadviddi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. If you want to know anything from me, ask me questions. So these are the qualities of a student in the Indian context. Asking question, being a seeker, and trying to find the truth, and whatever the truth, being ready to accept that truth. Like generally it happens, like, one starts a research with some goal in mind, but towards the by the end of the research, he understands that whatever he was trying to find is not the truth is something else. But at that point, a researcher accepting whatever truth has come out, that is a very big quality, and that is a quality which every student should have. This comes from the Indian context of the view of knowledge. Anything you would like to add, Aditya ji?
No, actually, patratva, you touched upon it. That the person should be qualified, and generally people say that, and these are all fake Western narratives, that the Brahmanas used to discriminate against Shudra because Shudra, Brahmana, these are Varna, not Jati.
Yeah.
So Varna, nobody is higher, nobody is lower. It's just based on occupation. And but patratva is important, because if somebody is going to misuse the information or doesn't value it, like many people become engineer, they get engineering degrees, but they work in sales. So they wasted a engineering degree of somebody else who would like to become a good engineer. So the patratva is very important, and it's not discrimination. Even today, if you want to get entered into a good school, like in India or in the West, you have to write an essay why you want to join the course. And if
Right.
that essay doesn't justify the course, normally you're not given entrance to that course. So people fudge over there to also, they write something good about only to get into the school, but actually they don't have inclination for that. And therefore those are the people who do not succeed in those professions, because they have no interest in it unless you
Yeah, they
like
don't have
that.
that right
Correct.
aptitude.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I just give you an example, that somebody wanted to get into the US Army, and in the interview he spoke about all business, and it's a live story, that he wanted to get into US Army, but he spoke about how good he is in making profit. He did not get admission to US Army because they don't want a businessman to be fighting a war. So that goes on, and it applies even today. So and it used to apply before too. I mean, Arjun did not get all the weapons. Arjun got all the weapons while others did not get all the weapons. The reason was he was qualified for using them. He was a responsible person. Yeah,
Very,
continue,
very
please.
true. Very, very well put, Aditya ji. So again, looking at knowledge, and what we see in the history is that in the West there was something called as forbidden knowledge. And forbidden knowledge, it included, a list of banned books. These were the books which were banned by the church, and they had an index. Actually, they had a index of all the books which were prohibited, and the Catholics were prohibited from reading those books. And it's interesting, the writings of Voltaire, of Copernicus, Galileo, Pascal, John Milton, all these people, their writings were banned. People were not, supposed to read it. And then there was also the censorship of Bible. Now, this is something very interesting because there were restrictions on translating Bible into vernacular languages. So there were many attempts at translating Bible, and whenever these were done, violators were considered as heretics, and they were burnt at the stake. They were killed, they were banished, and they were imprisoned. All these things happened to the people who tried to bring the knowledge of Bible to the common people. So these are some things that we see that have happened in the history. And actually it was only in 1966, so it is very recently, in 1966, that this index of prohibited books was it was closed. No more it is now a valid list, but it was there until 1966. So it's it's amazing. And there is also this idea of hiding knowledge. So I'll just give one example of uh, knowledge hiding which has happened in the past. Again, because knowledge is possessed by somebody, that person wants to keep it away from everybody else. And we see that in Roman times, what happened was, we are speaking about calendars, and we are speaking about lunar and solar calendars and all those things. So during those times, what happened was, uh, the year was measured in lunar way. So the year was a lunar year, but it had to coincide with the solar year. And to coincide with the solar year, extra month had to be added to the lunar year. So once in 2-3 years, whatever, one extra month would have to be added to it, so that the lunar year and the solar year would be synchronized with each other. And to do this, this was done by a pontifex, and he is a person who is a priest as well as he has political powers. So somebody who has both these powers, he would decide when to add that extra month in the calendar. And during those days, the magistrate's term in the office was generally 1 year. So when the priest's friend would be in that office, he would add an extra month to the year so that his friend would be there for a longer time. But if it's not his friend in the office, he would shorten the year. So they were playing with the calendar, and nobody knew about it because the knowledge about that calendar was only with very few people. This is what I call hiding knowledge from people. And what was the impact of this? During those times, during the Roman times, the uh, average people who were a little farther away from Rome, they wouldn't know what is the date today. This was the impact of all these things that were happening in Rome. And the other impacts are also very important because going ahead, what happened was the same calendar continued, and this calendar had to be corrected more and more often. So the first corrections came with Julius Caesar, and then there were corrections by the Pope Gregory. And every the corrections went on and on for so many times. In fact, today, what has happened, one can say what has happened because of this is that we are stuck with a calendar which starts on 1st of January. And 1st of January is in no way related to a solar event or to a event in Bible or to anything at all. It is not even related to seasons. So we are stuck with a calendar which starts on some arbitrary day, and it has any number of days in a month, variable number of days every month. So some months have 28, 29, 30, 31 days. The number of days in every quarter, they are different. The number of days in 6 months, they are different. And every year, the year will start on any day of the week. Every month will start on any day of the week. So these are so many problems which are associated with this calendar. And in my opinion, this comes because all these things, they were kept away from the common people. The knowledge of the calendar was kept away from the common people. Let us see what happened in India for the same thing. So India also had a lunar calendar, and this lunar calendar had to be synchronized with the solar calendar. And for this synchronization in India, an extra month used to be added every 2 or 3 years. But here the difference is this knowledge about the calendar, this knowledge about the year, about the movements of sun and moon, all of this was a common knowledge. Everybody had this knowledge. And thus, even in the remotest village in India, people would know what date it was. They would know what date of the year it was. So look, if you look at the size of Italy and if you look at size of India, and then you will understand how big this thing is. That somebody who lived a little away from Rome, he wouldn't know what date it was. But in India, such a huge country, anybody in any village would know the day of the year, what date it was. So this is how open the knowledge was. This is how open the things were for Indians. And what was the impact of this? The impact of this was the knowledge of calendars, the knowledge of time, the knowledge of time measurement was used in various branches, and so many branches that developed because of this. So, for example, the seasons that are based on festival. So, not seasons, festivals that are based on seasons. So, what we see is that in India, every day, almost every day is special. And this goes around the way time is measured. So even when an extra month is added in the calendar, that month is called as Adhik Mas, and there are different rituals that are to be done during the Adhik Mas. So everybody has to know when that Adhik Mas comes. Then there is a time-based raga system. So the music system in India, it is based on the time of the year. It is based on the month. It is based on the season. It's based on the time of the day as well. So this kind of system, this kind of music was could be developed only because those who were musicians, those who were artists, they had the knowledge of calendar. Then there is astrology, which is again dependent on calendar. Then there is Ayurveda, which is also dependent on calendar. In fact, Ayurveda has this Kapha, Vata, and Pitta cycles that are defined, and these uh, cycles, they are also dependent on the time of the year. So he who has a knowledge of calendar, only he can come up with these things. And same thing we see even in food sciences. What food is to be eaten in which month? What grains are to be eaten in which month? So all of this, it is based on the knowledge of calendar. And this is a huge difference that we see in the Western thinking of keeping knowledge hidden, keeping knowledge a secret, and the Indian way where knowledge is open, knowledge is to be given away. And this uh, this story from Bible, I think we will take a look at the story, which is the story of Adam and Eve. And God created the world. He created Adam and Eve, and then He let them go in the Garden of Eden. And they were roaming around, having fun. Everything was fine. God had only told them that they shouldn't eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. But then one day the serpent comes and he tempts Eve to eat the fruit, and Eve eats that fruit, and she also gives it to Adam. Adam also eats the fruit. And because of eating that fruit, they start understanding what is good and what is bad. Because the fruit, it is the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And that is why they start understanding what is good and what is bad. But in doing so, what has happened is they have disobeyed the God, and God gets very angry at them, and God comes and curses both of them. This is the story which comes in Bible. And what we see from this story is that it somehow associates eating the fruit of knowledge tree with guilt, eating the fruit of the knowledge tree with sin. This is how knowledge is associated with guilt. And I think probably this is something which has made an impact on the way in which the Western people have been thinking about knowledge, their view towards knowledge. For the same thing in India, here is something from Adi Shankaracharya. And Adi Shankaracharya, in his book Vivek Chudamani, he speaks about Vivek. So, Vivek, the word Vivek itself means knowing good from bad, knowing right from wrong, knowing good from bad, right from wrong, real from unreal. All these things, they come from Vivek. So, here what Shankaracharya is telling is that uh, whoever has Vivek, whoever is able to discriminate between right and wrong, and he who is Virakta is dispassionate, he who doesn't care of what the outcome is. Okay, like I start studying something and the outcome is not very good for me, or I start doing some research and whatever the output comes from that research is not something that I really want, but I should be dispassionate about it. I should be dispassionate about what is going to come out from that research. So I have to be Virakta. And he who has a burning desire for truth, he and only he is qualified to attain the supreme knowledge of self. So to have gain that supreme knowledge, one has to be able to differentiate between good and bad, between real and unreal, between temporary and permanent. So all these things, they come from the characteristic which is called as Vivek. And Vivek is something that is sought after in the Indian spiritual world. So this is also one thing which I see very different in the Western, or what comes in the story of Bible and what comes from the Indian thought. So what we see, there are uh, many Subhashid in Sanskrit which speak about Vidya, which speak about knowledge. And here is one which says that, Swadeshe pujyate Raja, Vidwan Sarvatra pujyate. Meaning, he who is a king, so he who has power and money, he will be respected in his own country. But he who is a Vidwan, he who has Vidya, he who is knowledgeable, he who has wisdom, he will be respected all over the world. So this is the view towards knowledge in the Indic and the Western system. So Aditya, your thoughts?
Great viewpoints. And I think Adi Shankaracharya has made such a big contribution to our culture. And through the system of knowledge, Vidya, Avidya, and the Vidya is totally different meaning. And sometimes we will talk about Vidya, what is Vidya and what is Avidya. And that comes from Yajurveda, actually, Sri Shopanishad. And the 40th chapter of Yajurveda and 40th or 41st chapter of Yajurveda. And the author of Yajurveda is the same, the disciple of Vyasadev, Vaishampayan, the one who spoke Mahabharata the first time. And the concept of Vidya is missing in the Western world. And Avidya is being sold as Vidya. So which is a biggest irony on all of us. But still, despite being from the Vedic culture, we are accepting Avidya as Vidya and Vidya as Avidya. Like what is to be known and what is not to be known, not everything has to be known. You're not going to learn something which destroys people. And that we have accepted as Vidya. So I think you bring very important points, and also gives a lot of new topics for us to discuss, because as we are mining knowledge, Vidya. And thank you so much for your time and wonderful presentation. Thank you. So
Thank you very much.
for viewers who are watching this, do comment on YouTube, and people who watched it live, give me your feedback so we include more topics. Namaskar and thank you.